Hello, comrades, and welcome back to Ushanka Show. Здравствуйте, дорогие товарищи. My name is Sergey, and I was born in the USSR.
Вы смотрите программу Ushanka Show.
Just a friendly reminder that my book American Diaries is available on Amazon.com, or shoot me an email if you would like to have a signed copy. Thank you. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about Soviet cars. I mentioned several times before that I got lucky. My father-in-law gave me a bunch of old slides from his uncle, who was a big world traveler in the 70s and 80s. He was a single guy, lived in the Detroit area, and he just traveled all over the world, and he kept this meticulous collection of slides, and a lot of them from his visits to Soviet Union, Leningrad, and Moscow. So what I want to do today is to look at one of his slides that I scanned, and unfortunately I have a really crappy quality scanner, and some of these pictures, they deserve a high quality, high res scanning, but I can't really afford it right now. So we're going to take a look at this picture taken in Moscow in the summer of 1970, and we'll talk about cars in this photo. But before we start talking about the cars on the picture, just let's try to look at the big picture. You're looking at the downtown. This is the heart of Moscow. Kremlin is right behind. So this is the downtown of the biggest city of the biggest country in the world. 1970 summer. Can't tell if it's a weekday or it's a weekend. I would assume it's a normal working day because there's a dumpster truck right in the middle. So this car is waiting the stoplight, right? So this is crazy to think about it. You're looking at the capital of the Soviet Union, the biggest country in the world, and it's like dead. There's only two people on the walking, and total of 14 cars, 2 trucks, and 1 bus, downtown stoplight. And actually, while we're on the topic of capitals, I want to tell you what I was always confused, because when I grew up in the Soviet Union, the capital is usually the biggest city. So for example, Moscow is the biggest city in Russia and in Soviet Union, so that's the capital, right, of Russia and the Soviet Union. In Ukraine, the biggest city in Kiev, and it's a capital. Minsk, the biggest city in Belarus, it's a capital, and so on and so forth. So it's always the biggest city, okay? So for me, based on that experience, originally when I was thinking about America, I always thought that New York City is the capital of the United States because it's the biggest city. Then, of course, if you learn a little bit more about America and you learn about states, if you think Michigan, probably capital of Michigan is Detroit, and capital of Illinois, or as we say, Illinois, is Chicago. Capital of California, definitely Los Angeles, you know. So it was really weird for me to discover that in America, capitals of states is actually small, obscure towns that you will have a hard time finding on the map. Like capital of Michigan is Lansing. Like, why is it Lansing? It's so small. At least Grand Rapids, or should be Detroit, right? I even don't know what the capital of Illinois is. So this is a huge difference in like how the capitals work between Soviet Union and Soviet republics and United States. Okay, so we are back in Moscow looking at the downtown traffic jam in summer of 1970, and let's talk about cars there on the picture. First car on the far left, kind of turquoise color, it's Volga GAZ-21. So Volga GAZ-21, and they call this second series, was produced between 1959 and 1961. The first series had a star on its grille, but they had issues exporting that model because there's some people in the capitalistic countries and even socialist countries weren't happy to have a star on the grille of their cars. For the second series, they changed the grille. Because of the new design of the grille, this car got a nickname like shark mouth or shark teeth, because if you look at the grille, it looks like a bunch of the shark teeth, right? So star is gone, replaced with the shark teeth. And some of you may recognize that this Soviet Volga looks very, very similar to 1954 Ford mainline. And that's because Soviet designers were inspired by that model. It was purchased in the United States, brought to Soviet Union for the Soviet designers and engineers to get inspired. Jay Leno had a good video about this car, so we're not gonna get into technical details. It's rear-wheel drive, 4-cylinder cast iron engine, 70 horsepower, not a lot, pretty heavy car, pretty small engine, max speed about 120 kilometers an hour, so it's about 90 miles an hour, something like that, and a total of 140,000 of these cars were produced in 2 years. So as you see, 70,000 cars per year, that's not a lot of cars to be manufactured, especially considering we're talking about the largest country in the world, the Soviet Union. Okay, so back to the main photo. Second car is so-called New Volga GAZ-24 01. So this model began its production in 1967 and they were making it for 10 years until 1977. It had more powerful engine, 95 horsepower, 4-speed manual transmission, and engine was aluminum block. This car also was inspired by some American model, probably Ford. I don't remember which model, but you guys can post it in the comments. It had a nickname Krevetka, shrimp, because of the way its grill looked. So as you see, nicknames for the Soviet cars were mostly based on the looks of the grill. This particular car on the photo is taxi cab version, has that very light turquoise kind of funny color that later was a famous lemon yellow. If you want to learn more about Soviet taxi drivers, you can check out my video number 88, where I talk quite a bit about Soviet taxi drivers and how rich they were and how awesome the job was during the good old Soviet days. Alright, back to the main picture. The third car is black Volga 24. Similar to a taxi car, but it has a yellow aftermarket fog lights, and it's probably used by some government agency since we're right next to the Kremlin, or some large industrial enterprise. So Volgas were a popular vehicle to carry around Soviet bureaucrats and Soviet party leaders, and black color was the color to go with. And here's actually another slide taken by Bill, American tourist, in 1970, probably the same day. And you see there's a whole line of Volgas, a lot of them black, and the drivers waiting for their bosses to show up. So this picture taken also by Kremlin from a different side. So you see a little traffic going on, and every single car is Volga 24. Okay, so next vehicle is a dump truck. So this truck called ZIL, Z-I-L, MMZ 555. So this truck was produced right there in Moscow at the ZIL factory, Zavod имени Likhacheva. So it's a factory named after Likhachev. By its color, which is kind of like a dark khaki green, you could tell that's a military truck. Military means it belongs to some military outfit. Unfortunately, as I said, it's a low resolution scan, but if we would see the license plate close by, usually a military license plate had only 2 letters. So it'll be 4 numbers and 3 letters. Military vehicles will have 4 numbers and 2 letters. And it kind of looks like short, so it's a truck that belonged to some military facility right in Moscow, and it's a dump truck, so it's interesting. Most of these trucks, they had a sky blue or green caps with white and grill, like a 2-color scheme, so that's pretty cool. The dump bed doesn't look stock, but it's definitely a dump truck. So as I said, this truck was manufactured right in Moscow at the ZIL factory, which I believe right now is closed and turned into some big shopping area or maybe some apartment complex, but it doesn't exist anymore. But then these trucks were shipped out of Moscow to Metishi, which is a suburban town, and that's where the dump truck factory was situated. So they would install dump beds and all the other stuff on the chassis, and they shipped to the customers all over the country. So this truck was a construction site workhorse in 70s and 80s, and it was also all over collective farms. There's tons of pictures out there. We could see ZIL trucks in the fields, as I said, at construction and so on. It was manufactured from 1962 all the way to 1994. And that's a separate topic I want to talk about it, that for how long we manufacture exactly the same models with just a little bit of improvements. So this truck was manufactured for over 30 years, and they made total of 3.3 million of these trucks. So it's a 6-ton truck, 5-speed manual transmission, 8-cylinder engine with 150 horsepower engine, so not a lot of power really. And as I said, it started being manufactured in 1962, and in the first 12 years they made 1 million trucks. So from 1962 to 74, they made 1 million. Then 1982 it was 2 million, and total was produced 3.3 million of these trucks, and I remember seeing them everywhere. Okay, back to the street view. So now we have a car number 5, and there's 2 identical looking white cars. Those are also Volga GAZ-21, but this one is called series number 3. So the very first car was second series. This is third series. So they also had their grille changed. So the third series was produced from 1962 till 1970, so for 8 years, and they manufactured a total of 470,000 cars. Once again, most changes were cosmetic, and they bumped the power on the engine to 75 horsepower. The old engine in the second series had only 70 horsepower, so now it's 75. They removed the famous deer, the hood ornament, which I thought was looking so cool, but apparently during car accidents, that deer was killing people. So for the safety reasons, they just removed it. Of course, they could build some fancy pop-up type hood ornament like Rolls Royces or Bentley have, but in this case, they just removed that cool-looking ornament. And once again, they changed the look of the front grille. So this car got a nickname Kitovy Us, so like whale baleen, I think it's called, right? So like the blue whale has its mouth open, has those little tiny holes when he's sifting through the water to eat those tiny plankton. So the name of this car was Kitovy Us or baleen. I'm struggling with the word, sorry. So those 2 cars, and maybe even third one behind, is the same car, Volga 21 third series. Okay, once again back to the street view. The next car, it's exactly the same Volga 24 as the black car number 3 and a taxi car number 2. And also if you look at the opposite lane, there's a car that drives away. It's another black Volga 24. Unfortunately, you can't tell because it's so far away and it's such a low resolution scan that if we could read the license plates, usually by license plate you can determine is that car private or government owned or like factory owned. But because it's picture taken right next to Kremlin, I would assume most of these newer Volga 24s are owned by government. Now the interesting car is right behind Volga 24, that light blue delivery van. This is Moskvich 434. Interestingly, there were 2 factories in Soviet Union. One was located right there in Moscow, and another one was located in Izhevsk, which is far east, almost in Siberia, I believe. But they were manufacturing exactly the same cars, one for one. So there was Izhevsky Moskvich or Moscow Moskvich. But Moskvich is actually, if you translate it into Russian, means Muscovite. So they call them just Izhevsky Zavod. And apparently some people thought the quality of assembly was better in Izhevsk than in Moscow. as always with Soviet cars, are nothing impressive about performance. It's a gas engine, 1.5 liter with 75 horsepower. As I said, it was used for deliveries, and since it was a cargo van, you couldn't buy it as a private individual. These cars were popular like for the postal service and for other type of deliveries. But if you were a person that want to buy a car like that, you weren't allowed to have it. And actually, you could see that car on the Soviet stamps when it showed the Soviet Postal Service, and you could see that car right there. And we're back to the main picture. So right behind Moskvich 434 is delivery van, and that's maybe because of the blue color. Maybe it's a postal van. There's another station wagon based on a Volga GAZ-21. So this is called a Volga GAZ-22, and as I said, it's a station wagon. So Volga station wagon GAZ-22 was used mostly as an ambulance, and private individuals were not allowed to buy this model either. I don't know why. Probably it was like means of production considered. So no private owners for those Volgas. One exemption was a famous Soviet actor Yuri Nikulin. So he got a special permission to own one in 1965, of course because of his status, his connections, and he needed a large trunk space to carry all his props and costumes. Besides being an actor, he was also a clown, so he had a bunch of clown props and costumes, so he was allowed to have a station wagon Volga 22. But this particular station wagon on the picture looks interesting because there is a solid steel inserts instead of the rear side windows, which is not stock. It wasn't manufactured like that. So somebody fixed that at the shop for whatever reason. So it was used for some kind of transporting goods, and they didn't want to bust the windows, so they replaced it with the metal inserts. I couldn't locate any other photos with the station wagon Volga 22 and the metal sides. Okay, we're moving along. Next car that in a distance looks really odd comparing with other cars, and that's a Moskvich 400 or maybe 401. And all I can say about that car, das ist fantastische Auto. Moskvich 400 was actually reverse engineered pre-war German Opel Kadett K38 with 4-cylinder engine and 23 horsepower. Reverse engineered, what I meant, actually Soviets brought the whole Opel factory from Rüsselsheim back to Moscow. It was whatever technical documentation they had, so all the equipment, all the drawings, and that's what they based their Moskvich 400 and was pretty much an exact copy of German Opel Kadett, which Comrade Stalin, for some reason, was a big fan of Opels. And there are rumors out there that Comrade Stalin actually had a big influence on designing a Soviet copy of Opel. Originally, it was a two-door, just like Opel Kadett, but he wanted Soviet Moskvich to have 4 doors. So there's be 2 suicide doors in the back and 2 regular doors in the front. So the mass production began in December of 1947, and total was manufactured about 216,000 4-door sedans. So from 1947 till 1956, they produced only 216,000 cars like that. Okay, so now we are looking at the bus. It's parked a little bit far away, so it's definitely not waiting for the green light. So this is LAZ 699 Karpaty tourist bus. This bus was manufactured in western Ukraine, in Lvov, or as we say in Ukrainian language, Lviv. And I believe that factory now is shut down, but it was manufacturing buses for many years. I used it many times and I always hated it. If you read my book, American Diaries 1995, I mentioned that bus in my story. After experiencing American bus with air conditioning, I thought about LAZ buses, which we used to call dushegubka, It's the same word that we used for the German death wagons, the ones that they used to kill people with exhaust gases. We called the same name, those gas chambers, we called the dushagubka, these buses, because they were so hot. Although the bus looked really cool, really retro, it has a rear engine and it was air cooled. So if you sit in the back of this bus, there was the back bench, man, it was like you sit on the frying pan. It has a pretty weak engine, 180 horsepower, same engine as a ZIL dump truck had on the front. And of course, no air conditioner available, and you had these lids you can pop open for some fresh air. So in the summer, this bus was horrible. And right behind the LAZ bus, you see there is a street sweeper truck. It's based on a GAZ-23, so it's a Gorьkovsky Автомобильный Завод. There was another workhorse of the Soviet Union. GAZ-23, like, if you look at it really quickly and you look at ZIL, they looked very similar. There's a slight difference in design, but otherwise you could see them on the streets, you could see them out in the country. They were mass produced in millions and they worked everywhere, construction sites, deliveries. A lot of GAZ-53 trucks were used for like bread deliveries. I saw them. Our collective farm, when I was in the village, they all had those GAZ-53 trucks too. As you guys know, I'm not really a car guy. Like, I know cars, but I don't know cars like in technical specifics, years it was manufactured and so on. So I asked for help with this video of my friend Rodion, who provided me with this commentary. I used heavily his commentaries telling you about this car, so I would like to thank him so much for his help. And he wrote in the end, commenting on this picture, that, so I think it's 1972 because I thought it was 1970. So like GAZ-24, so-called New Volga, and it was called New Volga all the way into 80s. It just got started being manufactured in 1970. So only 2 years later, and there's a lot of them already in the streets of Moscow because it's the capital of the Soviet Union. You won't see that many Volgas in other places in the USSR. But of course, because we're right by the Kremlin, where the Soviet government is located, you could see tons of Volgas. I mean, they dominate the street. Another thing that Rodion noticed is that it was an observation for him that not a single Vaz Zhiguli car started being manufactured in 1971. So here we're talking summer of 1972, and in this specific picture, that not a single Zhiguli car yet. So they just started being manufactured, and I mean there were some on the streets, but in this case, you see way more expensive Volga cars than more affordable and better Zhiguli cars. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Maybe you learned something new, but it's definitely a really cool photo, a really cool snapshot of the life in the Soviet Union in 1970s. We'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye. Hey, by the way, cool merch for cool comrades is available at the Ushanka store at teespring.com. And if you love my channel and would like to show your support, please click on the link below this video and become the patron of the Ushanka Show. For as little as $1, you can help us grow and create the new, interesting videos about the life in Soviet